Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
So Eruvin Daf continues a lengthy discussion about drunkenness and tefillah, and when you are allowed to daven when a person has alcohol in the system, and how to get rid of the alcohol. The Gemara will then take a bit of a detour to talk about learning and when the correct time to learn is, and if somebody should be learning at night or sleeping at night. Then the Gemara will go back to talking about wine and a number of agadic statements about wine. Then the Gemara will come back to the halachos of in Eruv, Chatzeros, and Ishetufim Avos. The Gemara will discuss cases where you have two Jews and a guy living together in the same region, except that they are not in the exact same Chatzer. You have a Chatzer within another Chatzer, and the question is, does it count as two Jews or one Jew living together? So first, let's go back to our discussion. So we have Rav Sheshes, quoting of Elazar ben Azariah, who says, I could really take off all complaints against Jews because of all the virus that they do. I could pater them all from the din, because from the day that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, we are all so oppressed by the various different troubles and tragedies that we're facing that it makes us as if we're drunk. Like it says in the pasuk in Yeshaya, L'chein Shimon Azais Aniya Ushchuras V'Miyayin, we were poor and drunk, but not from wine. So because we're drunk, so therefore not responsible for our actions, and therefore we could say that we are pater, we are free from all responsibility for the affairs that we do. So Gemara says, but hold on a second, how could you say that? The person who's drunk is responsible for the things that he does. Like the Brisa says, a drunk who buys something, the sale is valid. If he sells something, the sale is valid. And if he does an avera that carries the death penalty, he can get the death penalty. And if he does an avera that carries malchus, then he can get malchus. The rule is he's responsible for all his actions like a regular individual. There is no Torah of the fact that he's drunk. The only thing that he's pater from is tefillah. He's not supposed to daven because it's not appropriate for him to daven in the condition that he's in. So how could he go ahead and say that he's going to pater us from all aveiros of Sheshes? Gemara says no. What he meant to say was he's going to pater us for not davening correctly, for not davening properly. We couldn't daven because of all the troubles that were causing us to be like drunk itself. Says Rabbi Chanina, all these halachas that you're responsible for your actions is only true if you did not get as drunk as Lot did when he left the when he was given wine by his daughters. If, however, somebody was that drunk, then he's not responsible for any of his actions at all, just like Lot was responsible for his actions. Okay, now we're going to discuss somebody who skips tefillah because of drunkenness. So Rabbi Chanina says that the person should skip tefillah if he's drunk, and if he will do that, then he will prevent tsaros, so he'll prevent problems from happening to him. And he darshans a pasuk in Iyov. It says, Gava afike moginim sagor choisam tsar. He says it means Gava means the state of haughtiness induced by drunkenness. So if somebody will be afike maginim, he'll skip the mugin, he'll skip mugin avos, and skip the protection of tefillah, then sagor chaysim tsar, he will keep away from himself the troubling events, the tsaros. So that was how Rabbi Chanina said it. Now Yechon has a slightly different version, but it makes the same point. He reads that the word afikim doesn't mean to skip, the word afikim means to reveal. So he reads it as follows: Gava, during the time of drunkenness, afike moginim, if revealing tefillah, meaning having a real tefillah, sagur, if he keeps that away from himself, then chosim tsar, he'll be kept out of tsaros. So Gemara says the difference over here is, what does the word afike mean? According to Rabbi Chanina, the word afike means to skip. Where does he get that from? From a different pasuk that says, so you see, afikim nachlim yaveru, like afik is yaveru, to skip something. Afik means to skip over something. And Rabbi Yechanan has a pasuk that afik means to reveal, meaning to actually do tefillah, and then the word sagor is what's saying that you're not doing tefillah. So how does he know that afik means to reveal things? He has the pasuk in Tehillim which says, Vayero afiki mayim vayogoylu moizos tevel. It's referring to splitting of the Yam Suf, and Vayero afike mayim, it revealed and it showed the waves of the ocean. So you see that afike refers to revealing things. So Gemara asks, they both have very similar drashas. They read the psukim differently, but it comes out the same point. What's the difference between them? Gemara says the difference between them is that Rabbi Chanina is telling you to not daven. He's telling you to actually skip davening. Rabbi Yochanan is saying to withhold yourself from davening. The difference is that when should you actually say that now it's okay, now I am able to daven? So the practical difference is a incident that happened to Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes had alcohol in the system, and he told his servant, "Wake me up in a few minutes for davening." So Rav Sheshes was allowing himself to be woken up before he awoke naturally. Now, according to Rabbi Chanina, you're supposed to actually skip the davening. It says ta'avayrun, you should actually skip it. Afikim means to skip. So you should skip davening unless you can actually be fully competent, unless you wake up by yourself. He would not do what Rav Sheshes did. He would say you'd have to wake up naturally. Only then can you actually daven. Otherwise, skip it. Rabbi Yochanan is just saying delay it a little bit. You can ask your servant to wake you up. It doesn't have to be so well done as to be that you naturally awoke on your own after the alcohol wore off completely. Okay. Now the Gemara goes further. The Gemara goes to Chia bar Ashi in the name of Rav. Anybody who is not clear-headed should not daven at all. And he quotes a pasuk, Batzar al yoira, in confusion, Batzar in pain or confusion, al yoira, he shouldn't rule halachically, and therefore he also certainly should not be involved in tefillah because he won't be able to focus. So Rashi says, where is this pasuk? Batzar al yora. Masoras Shas doesn't quote anybody. Torah doesn't quote anybody. Rashi says no such pasuk exists. He says maybe it's in Ben Sira, which is a Sefer Chitzon, which was not included in the Sefer HaKodesh. Taisus brings a number of other psukim that may be referred to as Batzar al yora, meaning to say that Batzar al yora is not a direct pasuk; it's a drush based on a different pasuk. Now, Rabbi Chanina says, on a day where the wind is blowing primarily from the south, on the day when I'm angry and I'm upset, I don't daven because also I'm not clear-headed, and it says Batzar al Yora. Bar Ukva says in the day that the wind is blowing from the south and the weather was humid and muggy and it's uncomfortable, he didn't go to the Beis Din, he didn't hold court because he wasn't able to think clearly. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, in order to be able to rule in halacha, you need to be clear-headed like a day when the wind is blowing from the north and it's crisp and fresh and the weather is clean. Abaye says, I wasn't even able to concentrate if my mother, who's Abaye's stepmother, if she said to me, can you please pass the kutach, can you pass the cheese or the yogurt, I wasn't able to learn after that because that disturbed my focus. Rava said if I was bit by a louse, I wasn't able to learn. Marbe de Ravina's mother made for him 7 sets of clothing so that he could change his clothing every day and not have to wash it. That way he was wearing fresh clothing every day, so he shouldn't have any lice on his body that shouldn't bite him and disturb him from his learning, because that would mess up the learning altogether. Okay, now the Gemara discusses what is the best time for learning. Should you be learning at night or should you be sleeping at night? So Rav Yehuda says nighttime is the time for sleeping. Don't bother learning at night. You're not going to be able to focus anyway. Rav Shimon ben Lakish says no, the moon was made so you should be able to learn at night. It's dark, but there's a moon for a reason. So they said to Rav Zera, your learning is so sharp and clear. He said that's because that particular sugya I learned during the day when I was sharp and clear. Things I learned at night are not so clear. Now Rav Chizda used to learn a lot at night, and his daughter said to him, don't you need to sleep? So he said, I have plenty of time to sleep in the grave. Now I have to do other more important things. I don't have time to sleep now, and therefore I'm going to learn now. Now, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, we are workers of the day. We're supposed to be working during the day. We're supposed to be learning during the day. Rav Acha bar Yaakov used to borrow from the day and pay back at night, meaning he had a certain amount that he wanted to learn every day, but he also had a business, and sometimes he needed to borrow from his learning time and use it for the business, and then at night, afterwards, when he couldn't work anymore, he would fill in the time that he missed. Okay, says Rav Elazar, somebody who comes in from the road should not daven for 3 days. It takes 3 days for your brain to clear after the confusion of travel. Like it says, when Ezra was bringing in the people from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, Ezra said, "Vakavtim al-Anor haba el Ahava." I brought them to this river Ava, v'nach nesham yam shleisha, and we stayed there for 3 days. And then v'avinu bam, then I was able to look at the people and I was able to see them and I was able to clearly understand what was going on. Shmuel's father, when he came in from the road, he did not daven for 3 days afterwards. Shmuel himself did not want to daven in a house that had beer because the smell intoxicated him. He wasn't able to focus. Rav Papa wasn't able to daven in a place that had fried fish because the smell of that disturbed him as well. Says Rav Chanina. Now we have a number of agadic statements. Says Rav Chanina, somebody who is appeased by his own wine is like Hashem. Hashem is also appeased by his own things. Like it says, V'yarech Hashem is reich hanichayach, and Hashem after the Mabul smelled the good smell of the karbanos, even though the karbanos, the animals, are all his. Still, the fact that it was being brought to him, it Ki'ilu Kaviyachal appeased him, and he decided not to bring a Mabul anymore. It says Reb Chia, anybody who can drink wine and not become confused and not have it affect his thoughts has the mental acuity and focus of the 70 members of the Sanhedrin. Why the 70? Because it says Yain is Gematria 70 and Soid is Gematria 70. So you see that when wine goes in, secrets come out. Somebody who doesn't fall to that level is like the Sanhedrin. He has the clarity of thought that they did. Says Rav Chanin, wine was only created to comfort the mourning and to give repayment to the wicked in this world, that they can enjoy themselves in this world and have a good time, and that they won't have to have schar in Olam Haba. Says Rav Chanin, Bar Papa, somebody who doesn't have wine pouring in his house like water, is not like he has a bracha at all. Bracha is only if he has wine spilling like water. He has such bracha that wine can just spill freely like water. How do you see that? A pasuk that says in Shemais, Uveirachas lachmecha vesmeimecha. Lachmecha vesmeimecha, your bread and your water. So the Gemara says with this water doesn't mean regular water. It's comparing lechem and mayim. Both have to be the type of things that are bought with kesef meiser. You can use meiser sheni money to buy it. The rule is you cannot buy water and salt with meiser sheni money, as we saw earlier in the Masechta. So it's got to be referring to the type of liquid that you can buy with Ma'aser Sheni money, which is wine. And you see it's calling wine water. Obviously the bracha is only when your wine is like water. It spills freely, it pours freely just like water. That's when you have an actual bracha. Says Ravi Olay, a person can actually be recognized in his true nature in three things: with his cup, with his wallet, and with his anger, how he behaves with regard to when he has alcohol in the system, how he behaves with regard to money, and how he behaves when he's upset. Some add on also, also when he laughs, how he conducts himself when he's in a mood of hilarity. Okay, that ends the Agadah about wine, and now the Gemara goes into a discussion, again, about Shitufei Mavos. Gemara now returns to halachos of Shitufei Mavos, as we had seen. Earlier we had a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. When you have a guy, or we'll call an idol worshiper, living together with Jews in their yards or in their mavoi, when is there a problem created by the fact that the guy lives there and you have to do schiras reshus in order to make it mutter to carry there? Is it if there's only one Jew besides for the idol worshiper there's a problem because you have a Jew and another person living together and therefore it's shared property and you have to do an erev chatzeres or a shitufim mavos? Or is it only if you have at least two Jews? That's when you have a situation in which we view it as if there are multiple people living there, and you need to make a Shetufim Mavos or an Erev Chatzeres, and the fact that there's also an idol worshiper there makes it impossible to make that according to the Gzeir of the Chachamim. That was the Machlokes. According to Rabbi Meir, the problem is even if there's only one Jew living there. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, the problem is only if there are multiple Jews living there. So the Gemara here now has a case of two Chatzeres, two courtyards. One is within the other one. That means that the inner one has to walk through the outer one in order to get to the public domain. His only way in and out of his yard is going through the outer chutzner. Now, who lived where here? So it's as follows. The inner courtyard was shared by a Jew and an idol worshiper. The outer courtyard was inhabited only by one Jew. That was the only person who lived there. So the Jew and the idol worshiper of the inner yard had passage rights. They had foot traffic rights through the outer yard. So this question was asked: do the outer yard, do they have to make an Erev Chatzeres over here? And since they can't make an Erev Chatzeres because there's an idol worshiper involved, they therefore have to do Schiras Reshus. What's the status over here? So the Gemara says that the question was asked to Rabbi and to Rabbi Chia, and they both said that the person in the outer yard does have to make an Erev Chatzeres. He does have to do Schiras Reshus. The fact that there is an inner yard that has the people who live in the inner yard have a right to pass through the outer yard makes it a shared property, and therefore you have to do some kind of an Erev, and the fact that one of them is an idol worshiper means that you can't do it unless you rent part of his rights. After Schiras Reshus. So the Gemara says that after the Shir of Rav Sheshes, Rabbi and Rav Yosef were sitting and discussing this, and someone said that this is only in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir said that it's a problem even if you have only one Jew, and here the outer courtyard has only one Jew living in it, and the guy that's passing through makes a problem. So you see, this must be Rabbi Meir's opinion, because according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, there's only one Jew in the outer yard, and therefore there's no problem. You have to have at least two Jews in order for there to be a requirement for an Erev. So Rabbi Yosef said, how could two big people like Rabbah and the one who said this, Rav Sheshes, how could they both believe that such a thing is true? It cannot be that this was said according to Rabbi Meir, and the reason that there's a problem is because it cannot be that the situation is according to Rabbi Meir, and the reason why there's a problem is because you have one Jew living in the outer yard, and it's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Because if that was true, what is the significance in the case of having a Jew in the inner yard? Just say you have a idol worshiper in the inner yard, and he's passing through the outer yard, and that's it. According to Rabbi Meir, you have the same question. Does his rites of passage mean that you need to make a schiras rishus? You certainly have to make an erev, and the answer will be yes, you do. What's the significance of having the person in the inner yard, the Jew in the inner yard for? So maybe you want to tell me, oh, it's really not significant. It just that's happened to be that's what the story was. But then that cannot be true, because when this story was brought up and was asked to Rav and Rabbi Chia, Talmidim asked, what is the halacha about the guy in the inner yard? Is he allowed to just carry in his yard himself, or does he also have to worry about an Erev of some sort? And the answer was that for him it's mutter, there's no problem. And if we're going to Rabbi Meir's opinion, he also has an idol worshiper living together with him in his yard. He should also have to do an Erev, and he should also have to do schiras rishus. How does he get out of this? It must be that this has nothing to do with Rabbi Meir. This is really the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and therefore the middle yard, the inner yard, has no problem because there's only one Jew who has rights to that yard, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds there's no problem if there's only one Jew there. The outer yard, that's where there's a problem, and it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion. And the reason why there's an issue is because there are two Jews who have rights to the yard. There's one who lives there, and then the one who has the rights to pass through, the one from the inner yard, that's where there are two Jews, and that it's considered that there are two Jews who have rights to it, and it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov who says that it's only a problem when you have two Jews, and because it's an idol worshiper who also has rights to pass through, that's why you have to do schiras rishus. So the Gemara says, well, hold on a second. Why do I need the guy? Even if the guy isn't there, you still have a problem. You can't carry because the Jew that's in the inner yard has rights to pass through the outer yard. And again, we're assuming that the fact that you have rights to pass through makes it that you need to have an Erev. Again, this is the this halacha, that the fact that you pass through considers you a resident and you have to make an Erev or a schiras rishus. That's Rabbi Akiva. That's his opinion there. So Gemara says, you're right. The situation here is where they made an Erev Chatzeros, and therefore if you would just have a Jew in the inner yard, it wouldn't be a problem because we have an Erev Chatzeros. There's a Jew in the inner yard, a Jew in the outer yard. The Jew in the inner yard passes through the outer yard, and therefore it's considered like he has rights in the outer yard, and therefore he's a resident. You have to make an Erev Chatzeros, but they did make an Erev Chatzeros. The problem is that there's a guy there, and he messes up your Erev Chatzeros unless you do schiras rishus. The Gemara now asks, what happens if you have the situation reversed? The idol worshiper actually lives in the outer yard together with a Jew, but the inner yard has only one Jew living by himself. So what's the issue over here? The issue is as follows. The case which we discussed earlier, when the idol worshiper lives together with a Jew in the inner yard, over there, the idol worshiper could not just freely murder that Jew, because that Jew would have no way to get out of his yard without passing through the outer yard. And therefore, if he disappears, the Jew in the outer yard is going to accost the idol worshiper and say, what happened to that Jew? You must have done something to him. And therefore, he'll be afraid to just go ahead and murder him freely, even though he lives with him on his own, because the guy in the inner yard can't get out without the guy in the outer yard knowing. And therefore he'll say, what happened to him? He cannot have left without me seeing him. The idol worshiper will not be able to say, I don't know what happened to him, he just walked out. He'll say, well, he didn't walk out, I would have seen him. And therefore it's got to be that you did something to him. In a situation like that, he won't murder him freely, and therefore the Jew on the inner yard is okay living together with an idol worshiper. He's not afraid of being killed, and therefore it is not an unlikely scenario for him to live like that. Since it's not an unlikely scenario, the Gzeira of Chazal, that Jews should not live together with idol worshippers in a yard, does apply. It only applies in likely scenarios. And since it does apply, we say that there is a gzeira and they have to do a schiras rishus. Does that apply only in a situation like that, where the Jew and the idol worshiper are together in the inner yard and the Jew can't get out of his yard without being seen by the outer yard? Or does it also apply in a situation in which the idol worshiper lives together with the Jew in the outer yard? Now here you don't have that scenario quite. He could theoretically kill him and tell the guy on the inner yard, I don't know, he walked out. I don't know, you didn't see because you're in the inner yard. He's in the outer yard. He walked out. Not my problem. Or do we say, no, the idol worshiper is not going to feel free to kill the guy, even though he's a murderer. He's not going to feel free because the Jew on the inner yard could show up walking through at any time, and he doesn't want to get caught. And therefore, it is a likely scenario, and the Gezerah of Chazal does apply, and you do need to have Schiras Rishus. That's the Gemara's question. Do you have a situation like that or not? So the Gemara says, this question was asked. Rabbi Elazar asked Rav this, and the answer that he said was Ten l'chacham v'yechgam oid. The guy's presence, the idol worshipper's presence there, actually asers the situation as well, and is also forbidden. And the Gezerah of Chazal does apply. Okay, now the Gemara has another incident over here. Rish Lakish and the Talmid of Rabbi Chanina went to stay in an inn, and there was an idol worshipper staying in the inn as well. Actually, it wasn't the idol worshipper himself. The idol worshipper, was renting from another idol worshipper, and the renter wasn't there, the landlord was there. And the question was, they needed to do Schiras Rishus, they had to rent permission to use the land, but they couldn't rent it from the renter, who's the one who has the rights to use it. The only person who was there was the landlord of the renter, who was also an idol worshipper. The question was, can you rent rights to use it from the idol worshipper who's the landlord, or could you only rent from the renter? So Gemara says that if the landlord has no rights to kick out the renter at any time, then certainly he has no rights to the apartment at all. He rented it away. He has no right to enter it. So he cannot rent the right to go in to the Jews, and therefore you wouldn't be able to rent from him. If, however, he does have the right to kick him out, there we have a question. He has not kicked him out. But since he theoretically could kick him out, does that mean that he has enough rights to rent to the Jews who want to be able to do Schiras Rishus, or not? So the Gemara says that they went and they rented from him, and then afterwards they went and they asked Rav Afes, and Rav Afes said, you did good, you're allowed to rent from him because he has a right to kick him out. Okay, another incident here, and that is Rabbi Chanina bar Yosef and Rabbi bar Abba and Rav Asi went to stay in a hotel, and the hotel owner was a idol worshipper. And he wasn't home. He wasn't around for Shabbos, so they made an Erev Chatzeros, and then the guy showed up on Shabbos. The guy came in. Now they have to do Schiras Rishus from him because he lived there as well. So they were discussing, you're allowed to do Schiras Rishus on Shabbos. Is Schiras Rishus like making an Erev, that it has to be there at the beginning of Shabbos? An Erev Chatzeros has to be there the first moment of Shabbos. If you do it in the middle of Shabbos, it doesn't help. Or is it like Bittul Rishus, where the Jew relinquishes his rights to a yard because he didn't make an Erev, where he's allowed to do that even on Shabbos? So they weren't sure, are you allowed to do Schiras Rishus on Shabbos or not? So Rabbi Chanina bar Yosef said, yeah, let's do Schiras Rishus. You could do it. Rav Asi said, no, you can't. You got to do it before Shabbos. Rabbi bar Abba said, okay, let's go with the old man here. Let's go with Rabbi Chanina bar Yosef. And they did do Schiras Rishus. And then later they went and asked Rabbi Yechanan, and he said, you did good. You're correct. You are allowed to do it, even on Shabbos.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.